attended dolphin shows and I really enjoyed them. Now looking back at it, captive bred animals have a reputation of being aggressive towards humans and other captivity animals. The most controversial captive bred animal that tends to be more aggressive towards humans are the orcas, or also known as the killer whales. When orcas begin to are on the endangered list, people have an opportunity to see these creatures not only in captivity but also in the wild. I have been to aquariums and shows before, so I can learn more information about these sea creatures. In this speech, I am talking about orcas, the environment, social hierarchy, and captivity life. The first topic I am going to talk about is the orca's environment. Orcas live in the Pacific Ocean region. And according to the NOAA Fisheries website, wild orcas are located in Alaska, Norway, and Antarctica. Also, some other locations that these beautiful creatures are on are in the border of Canada, Washington, and California. Orcas also have been spotted in Argentina, Russia, and in Spain. Water temperature for these beautiful orcas has to be below 0 degrees because they do have blowers to keep them warm in colder weather, and plus they do travel long distance. But orcas also been spotted in the east coast and warmer oceans because of their prey are moving more and more to closer warm areas to get away from them. Orcas prey on seals, seabirds, fish, and squid. According to the SeaWorld website about behavior, when orcas are hunting for prey, they hunt together as a pod. In addition to talking about the environment, I am going to talk about the social hierarchy in orcas. NOAA Fisheries mentions that male orcas live up to 30 years out in the wild, and female orcas live up to 60 years in the wild. SeaWorld's website also mentions that there are different pods, and they also have different sizes for those pods. Different size group for the ranges. The range for the pods are 5 to 100 orcas per pod. NOAA Fishery mentions that orcas have their own way of communication with other orcas because of how big pods they are. So when a orca is out in a pod and they're swimming, one gets lost, they'll communicate in their own form of communication to let them know that, hey, I'm over here, and they'll find, the pod will communicate back and tell them where the location, and they'll find that orca. Additionally, SeaWorld's site mentions that orcas' pods are normally female dominant, and they're also looked up as the leader. When orcas are in a pod, they show dominance in many different forms of way out in the wild. One way is by hitting their tail in the water so hard that it creates waves. Also, biting is the second form, and the third form is raking. Raking is when an orca scrapes their sharp teeth along the side of another orca's side, which I'm going to demonstrate. So my card is scraping up and down the orca's side, which that is raking. Lastly, orca will discipline their young ones out in the wild. That form is, SeaWorld talks about that, is when one little kid is out swimming and they end up wagging their tail to slow their movement down so that they won't go too far. So they restrict their movement. Second part that I'm going to talk about is social hierarchy, is breeding. Orca breeding is so different from being in the wild than being in captivity bred. According to NOAA Fisheries website, females orcas do not start breeding until they are between the age of 10 and 13 years old. Male orcas do not start breeding until at the age of 25. In captivity or bred orcas, their process is very painful. The form of breeding that goes on in captivity is through impregnation, which is when they inject a male sperm into a female orca to start reproduction. In the article written by Ingrid Nuremberg called OP-ED, SeaWorld was right to stop breeding orcas, but it should go further on from the Los Angeles Times. Tells a short story about Takara, an orchid at SeaWorld that had her first calf at the age of 10 and the father was Telegum. Takara's story leads me into my last main point. The last main point that I'm going to talk about is captivity life for these orcas. First point that I'm going to talk about is their enclosures. Their water conditions is so poor that the orcas is forced to live in these. Their water is mostly filled with cleaning supplies, so it helps fight bacteria and also keeps the water clean so that people can see them. Supplies. Another thing I want to point out is that their enclosure is so small that they have no room to move. In the article written by Jason Swerd called From Nilosion to Nostalgia, Blackfish 2013, and the Conservations of the Natural document from EBSCOhost, mentioned that orcas will get stressed out in their closure and they'll start getting psychological issues. Psychology issues that orcas deal with in captivity is that they'll start chewing on their enclosure. Their enclosure is normally made up of concrete, so when they get bored, they'll just start chewing on the enclosure because they have no form of stimulation. And it actually will cause them to break a tooth. And when a tooth normally breaks out, they'll just sedate the orca and just take the whole tooth out so they're missing one whole tooth. Another form of psychology issues that orcas have is that they'll start hitting their head on their walls, which will cause damage in their face and on their neck and the back. So for a demonstration, so this orca is swimming and they'll just start ramming to the wall because they have no form to turn. It's too small. The last version is the orcas will start getting aggressive towards other orcas in captivity and also their trainers, because the only way that keeps the trainer and the orca bond together is through food, and they just get fed right down the hatchet. They can't hunt, so that's not stimulation them. To summarize, orcas have multiple factors that make an orca stand out when it comes to marine life, in the wild and also in captivity. In my speech, I talk about orcas' environment, like location and temperature, social hierarchy between family and breeding, and psychology issues that are found in captivity bred orcas. I would like to end my speech with saying that people need to focus more on understanding orcas' lifestyle because they are an endangered species. Once an orca is all gone, there's no way to get these beautiful creatures back.